Disclaimer. The hosts of this podcast, Timothy Patrick and Will Foley, are by no means professionals. However, having lived experience with mental illness themselves, they have gained useful perspectives on common mental health issues that some of us struggle to overcome on a daily basis. By sharing their stories, they hope to create connection. By creating connection, they hope to help you find your purpose. And through purpose, we can all begin to build the foundations for positive mental health. This is the Above Ground Podcast.
Are you ready to lace up your boots, throw up your horns, and jump into the pit? Then let's stomp the stigmas of mental illness. It's time for Above Ground Podcast. Now, Will Foley and Timothy Patrick.
Hello, hello, hello. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another fun-filled episode of
Above Ground Podcast.
Above Ground Podcast, because you
Can't
serve.
below.
What's up, Will?
What's up, TPP? You down with TPP?
Yeah, you know me. Hello, everybody.
What are we talking about this week, Timmy?
We had Will and I had a discussion. Not really even a discussion. We just I think we were just kind of chatting back and forth about being. I don't remember how it started, but it was just something about like what would be a better word, validation or acknowledge. And then he was like, after like 50 or so texts back and forth of us trying to figure stuff out, he's like, dude, this would be a great episode. So here we are.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that and it's not funny, but it's just ironic that interpersonal effectiveness as one of the skills in DBT has a lot to do about validation, and I did not realize that there was so much. And I know we don't really get super, in depth about a lot of these things all the time, but I like to cover a lot of different stuff. We like to cover a lot of different stuff, and I thought that this was a pretty important thing as to is it more important to acknowledge? Is it more important to validate? Are they the same thing? Are they not the same thing? And there's a lot more to the sauce than just some tomatoes and some spices, man. There's other things that go into it, and it's like I didn't realize how
I think
connected they are.
And I also think, it's not necessarily what goes into the sauce, but it's who you're feeding, who you're giving the sauce to. Is it going to be the sauce going to be for Christmas dinner? Is it going to be for an anniversary, or is it just going to be a sit down? Hey, let's just get some family together and have a regular dinner night.
Well, yeah, that dinner. Wow, that dinner. Well, yeah. Is it just a quick meeting for a light breakfast, or is it a 5-course meal where
right,
you're getting different courses and everything else?
So after kind of like just, between talking to you and like trying to like look stuff up on my own, I kind of come to the conclusion, at least for me, in my opinion, acknowledge is more of an action, where validation is more of a feeling.
Yeah, and I was kind of against. I think that to me, acknowledge is more of an action. Validation is the action of actually listening to someone and having the empathy to empathize with that person without judgment. And that's the biggest part that I did not, you know what I mean? I knew it had something to do with judgment, but I didn't realize how in interpersonal effectiveness the validation was such a big kernel of it. And actually, and in this interpersonal effectiveness handout that I have in front of me, it even says that validation means finding the kernel of truth in another person's perspective or situation and verifying the facts of a situation, acknowledging that a person's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors have causes and are therefore understandable, not necessarily agreeing with the other person, not validating what is actually invalid. And
therein lies the convoluted pot of stew.
Yeah, there's the stew right there. It's like, wow. Wait a second.
So acknowledgement is more of I guess, acceptance of the truth or existence of something.
But the truth doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, because the true, like, you could acknowledge that a truth is true, but you aren't going to necessarily believe that it's true.
Okay.
Because you have a different view of it. But I think that that's where validation says you can have a different view of it, but you're not supposed to implicitly put your view on that.
I gotcha.
You just have to accept that other person has that feeling or that journey or that emotion without you saying it's not wrong or right. It just is.
Would you say acknowledgement is more like on the surface as to where validation is more like deep, more a process of steps, more deep being, just more deep, I guess?
I think validation in this sense of interpersonal effectiveness takes more deep work than just acknowledging something.
Right.
I mean, you can acknowledge that the sky is blue, but to validate that the sky is blue, but it can also be, it can turn to night and be black and have stars, and I think there's a different level of.
So I guess my question is, I mean, I personally think that most people acknowledge with the intention to validate or of validating.
I don't actually. I don't think, and I think I just did it. I just unvalidated what you just said by and I like, it's weird. It's weird because when I look at these things, I'm like, I do it all the time.
So can you validate without acknowledge?
I don't know.
I don't think so. I don't know.
I'm because to validate is to make
every invalid response makes sense in some way. Like you said, validation isn't necessarily agreeing. Doesn't mean you like it. It only validates the valid.
Right, and there's valid arguments to be made about anything, but that doesn't mean that you want them to be that. Doesn't also mean that you even acknowledge that happens.
Or it doesn't necessarily mean that it's fact.
True, because it could be.
Could be totally like in your head. Like, again, this is why I wrote down reference point. I think everything starts with that reference point. Like, whether the person has mental illness or not, it can help us understand where the person is coming from. Kind of like if it's similar, like I've seen like people say, or memes that say, don't judge my story on the chapter that you walked in on. Similar. You know what I mean? It's like you don't know. Like, you're going to see my scars and go, oh, there's some dude that, blah, 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 this, and start your judgment and assumptions.
Well, right, and I think a lot of it has to do with judgment.
Sure.
And how do you put that judgment aside?
That's
even
hard.
if it's not, and I don't necessarily know if all judgment is bad per se. I don't know. I haven't done enough deep work to think about that. Is all judgment bad?
I don't know.
But I suppose if you're already judging something, I suppose then you are invalidating. I don't know.
The ability to make considered decisions or come to a sensible conclusion. A misfortune or calamity viewed as a divine punishment.
Well, yeah, there's a.
So the problem is it's kind of, I feel like it's on you. Like by me judging you, say, it's really gonna come back and bite me in the ass.
I could see that.
I
think judging anybody comes back to bite you in the ass.
Right.
Because again, you're only judging from your reference point. And so you can only go at
that's
your
what I mean.
reference
Like, that's
point.
why I wrote that down. It was very useful for me when I was going through this and trying to think, and I'm just like, that's a big pot of gumbo, man.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of veggies and fish in that gumbo, man. But is judgment bad? First of all, I mean, you have to judge the distance between you and the hole if you're going by a hole and you don't want to fall in it, and that's not necessarily a bad judgment.
So I think judgment is like, I guess I would put it in the category as as how I try to view emotions. They're not good or bad. They just are what they are.
Yeah, and however, though, does that in the throes of being, confronted with something that you don't necessarily agree with, does that is that a skill that we have? And we can say we have that skill, but I don't think that most of us have developed that skill enough to be able to say that 110% for sure.
Yeah, I can't really.
And it comes really with meeting people where they are,
which is
another thing that is often hard to.
It is hard, but would you say by meeting somebody where they are, is that validation?
Well, that is validation.
Okay.
I think that's a good reference point to say that validation is meeting somebody where they are without trying to fix, trying to change,
just trying to put yourself in their shoes,
interjecting even your opinion about it, whether you agree with their journey, whether you agree with their opinion, or whether you agree with this or that. It's that you meet them where they are and you say, okay.
Yeah, no, I like that. I would say.
But does that mean that, but I think it's awfully hard to just move on from that point without looking at the whole picture and saying, okay, well, you've been here, and, I have to acknowledge that you've been there. Regardless of whether I want to or not, you still have to give that person that. You still have to give them that, because that is their reference point. That is what they've seen. That is what they've experienced. And especially, if you're talking about stigma and stuff, your reference point is pretty, you could have a pretty...
And I think each case is different. I really do.
I think that there's some truths, though, that are not different.
Yeah. Yeah,
that
they could be different in the fact of a different scenario, different person. As I tried to go and ask some people, would you rather be acknowledged or validated? Just in general, not anything specific. Just off the top of your head, would you rather?
Well, you asked me that, and I actually didn't know what the answer was.
A lot of people didn't.
And I think because a lot of people misconstrue validation with acknowledgement. I think you can be acknowledged for a job well done with a pat on the back, but that doesn't mean that they validate you as a person.
Right, but at the same time, we can't look at that person and go, screw him, he didn't validate me.
Well, right, because then you're invalidating the other person.
Exactly. See how it works?
It does work that way.
I think that's why. That's kind of where I'm trying to explain it in words, and I just can't do it. That's where what I mean by different situations and specific. You know what I mean? Each case would be different. If I ask you what you think of an idea that I have, hey, Will, I have this idea, and you're like, cool, that's, I like it, and I'd be like, all right, cool, I just want your opinion on it, kind of thing. But if I'm asking a stranger what they think of it, and they're like, it stinks, and then I'm gonna get worried about it, no, that shouldn't happen.
I get where you're coming from, but depending on your reference point, you may internalize that.
Sure.
And that may invalidate your thought of it being good. And that comes to self-worth. And I think that validation does. I think there's a lot of self-worth wrapped up in validation, because I think you can be acknowledged by strangers easier sometimes than you can be validated by people that you care about.
And
that care about you.
And is that because they may not know your story, or?
Well, I think it comes to that where we were talking in one of our past episodes about masks and how you were saying that people put a mask on you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was in our Eyes of a Stranger episode there before last year, that that people kind of put a mask on you, but I'm not sure where I stand on. I think it's easier for for you to be acknowledged from other people than it is to be validated sometimes.
By other people.
By other people. Because you can, like I said, you can be acknowledged for doing something well or doing something good or, whatever. But true validation, I think, really does start from within. Because you can't accept anything if you don't accept yourself.
Right. And I think I wrote that down somewhere and I just can't find what I wrote. But it's like that's how I feel like that's how it should be, is like you should, again, I say should because,
Well, yeah, but you can't say should because just because you think it should doesn't
and I don't mean,
because is that fact?
Well, no, but I'm not saying like that's the way. I'm saying it like in a perfect world, like it would, that's how it would be beneficial for everybody if we wouldn't have to technically rely on outside validation.
Right, you can validate yourself.
Right, validate yourself. Others, they can acknowledge.
But what happens though if
it's a big responsibility to put on people, I think.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily think that it is, because there's certain parts of people's journeys that are really like wrapped up in a lot of things that and you have to acknowledge that there wouldn't be a lot of these other things if that didn't happen in the first place. And and I think that and it's like you can't,
Yeah, no, I get that for sure.
Just like, I mean, look, the stigma of mental illness is and mental health is baked in it because there were things that were put into effect by people that said, "Oh, well, because you have this, well, we can put you away. We can so you got to, I mean,
and some of it, again, I like
and
to
it wasn't
think that
done with
people,
good intentions. None of it was
well,
good.
I like to
none
think
of it
some
was
of them
done
didn't
with
know
good
any better
intentions.
though. If you got an Apple, like next time you're on your phone, and sometimes it likes to, if you're texting, it likes to pick the next word for you.
Yeah.
Type in committed, see what comes up.
I'll have to try that.
It's interesting.
Is it interesting?
Yeah, sure. First word that popped up.
I got my phone
So
here,
it's
so
like,
we're going to try this now. Committed. All right, I'm going to text you and see what happens.
All right, you do that. So I think
first I got to spell it right though.
Oh, jeez.
Committed, commuted, committed.
But did you spell it right and then?
No, it changed it to commuted.
Oh, well, that's probably why. Weird. Huh.
Now, what happens if I Google it?
All right. Well, anyways, it worked. It did it for me. So there's a perfect example of it's different in every case, I guess, right?
Well, yeah.
So, validating and invalidating statements and curious questions. So I just want to read off a couple examples of invalidating statements. Make it about your feelings. Like, I guess an example would be, how do you think that makes me feel?
That would be invalidating.
Right. And that's, to me, that's pretty much every conversation that I have with people.
How would it make me feel?
That's all, yeah. Marsha. It's that whole, you're too sensitive and you're so dramatic kind of thing, How about, like, judgmental statements? What you did was wrong, bad, stupid, or good. What you did was good, great, blah, blah, blah. Those are kind of invalid.
Yeah, they sound very judgy.
Exactly. So examples of validating statements would be like, I can see you are making an effort, and I can see how hard you are working.
But what if that's not really true though? What if
it works for that person, then who cares?
Yeah, but
I'm going to say this and probably get burned at the stake for it, but compare it to religion.
But just because something works for somebody doesn't mean that it's right, nor does it mean that it's...
No one's saying it is, but if we're talking about, we're just talking about most people that answered me back with the question of acknowledge or validate, chose validation. So if someone says to you, I see you are working hard, you're hard at work, and you're doing a good job. you're going to be like, well, you don't believe it, screw you. So then the whole process is just canceled. You see what I mean?
Well, yeah, they cancel out. They cancel.
It's like,
one
so it's
another
like
out.
silly. Like, so each party has a responsibility, I feel. You know, you have to be able to go, cool. And whether they believe it or not, who cares? Like,
Well, so does that just mean that if you can't come to some sort of agreement on that you just say, well, fuck it then? Like, it's not worth it. Because that's
yeah, it's
really
not worth it. Because you're
that's
seeking,
really what it is.
then you're seeking validation. And I'm not saying like people are bad because they're seeking validation. I mean, we all do it, but I just feel like it may not be best. I don't know if we were meant to be this way, because I think seeking validation can cause more suffering.
I see where you're coming from.
That's why, I mean, I kind of feel like acknowledging is more of a safer way. I'm not saying it's the best way, or I'm not saying anything. This is just my opinion. It's just kind of like, it leaves it almost open-ended.
So,
like, hey, Will, that came out great, and you can just go. You can now, if you had a bad day, you can sit in your head and go, Jesus, he was just saying it to be a jerk, or he didn't mean that, or but then that's on you. Like,
well, that is on
you're
you.
creating that whole assumption, that whole judgmental piece of information on your own.
So McLean Hospital in Massachusetts, one of the most renowned mental health clinics from Harvard Medical School. So I have this validation, making sense of the emotional turmoil and borderline personality disorder. And invalidation is when a person's emotional experiences are rejected, ignored, or judged. And characteristics of an invalidating environment: dismisses private emotional experiences, punishes high displays of emotions, and rewards behavioral control, makes problems seem easier to solve than they do for the other person. See, and I look at all that, and I see so much of that going on now in today.
Yeah.
And I see it, but unfortunately, I see it in the institutions that are not supposed to be doing that.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
But those institutions were formed to do that, and that's the problem.
See, this is the thing. We have a system that has the system itself is in need of reconfiguring.
Right, but the system
so,
also is in need to pay back to people what the system has created. I'm sorry, because I personally think that is a fact.
That's
because
fine. That's
you
your
wouldn't
opinion.
have that. You wouldn't have that system had it not been.
Right, but how can you really pay somebody back? I
Well,
guess is my question.
You do.
I think by paying it back is by making that change. I think that would be paying it back to everybody. Look, we're sorry that it happened to you. Now we know better, and now we're going to do better. Like, now we're stopping right here.
But I don't think we do know better.
I
really don't. I don't think that.
I'm not saying we do, but I'm just saying like that's what, in theory, should be. That would be a more positive way to do it. Is to go, hey, this isn't working. Like, we had these old ways, and see, the problem is everybody wants to look at old ways of this and that.
Yeah, but the
really
old
don't
ways
have
are
a
what
problem
created. But the old ways are what created this system in the first place.
Right, but there's some old ways that work.
Very few at this point, because again, I agree. We're not 300 years. We're 300 years. Ahead in the world in a lot of things. But the problem is that I think a lot of things have not ever been rectified from the past. And we know this. The cycle just continues, and it comes back. And it comes back worse than it did the time prior.
I think
it comes back
if you
worse
focus
than the
on what
time
we're
prior.
talking about, though, I'm talking about like
but it all
mental health facility.
But it all interplays.
I guess at some point.
Because there were things that were put into place in the mental health system in the 1800s that literally baked into the pie things that we haven't gotten over, that we've never rectified.
Well, we need people to step up and take over these positions, Hopefully make a change. But the problem is there's so many levels higher above wherever somebody is that they don't care about it, So again, we need somebody that's a little bit more educated and aware.
Yeah, but is education really the key too?
That's why I said aware. I said educated and aware.
And I think self-awareness is the big thing. But what happens when you can't look at yourself in the mirror and you can't understand someone else's opinion because you just don't agree with it?
Well,
that doesn't make it fact that you don't agree with it.
Well, that's the problem with this whole validation acknowledge thing, though. Just because, again, like your original first gut reaction was people should be validated. And then you put what you just said out of your mouth in that scenario, and it's almost impossible because people are like, they're hurting. They're not healed. So you're getting two people that aren't.
It's hard to heal something when you don't even acknowledge that it exists. Because there's a lot of non-acknowledgement that things are bad because somebody only sees it from their perch.
Okay. But at the same time, again, this is what kind of gets us into this negative cycle.
Well, right, but you can't break a negative cycle if you're not even willing to acknowledge that a negative cycle exists because it didn't exist for you.
No, if somebody acknowledges it and then you are the person that, it happened with you and you're like, that's not good enough.
Yeah, but what happens?
It's understandable, but at the same time, it's like what?
Yeah, but
what's
it may
end?
not have even happened to me particularly.
I know,
but you know it happens though. So it's one of those things where if there's certain things that you just can't break, like how do you you're not going to break a stupid idiot out of a stupid opinion.
No,
because
so why waste your time and energy worrying
because
about
unfortunately
it?
a
Or
lot of
trying
stupid
to get
opinions,
validated.
a lot of stupid opinions make a lot of decisions that affect a lot of other people.
True. That's why I'm saying we need somebody that's more educated and aware to step up and to go after these roles. It's like, there's a lot of people that are,
Yeah, but there's a lot of people who are book smart who have no sensibility whatsoever.
Okay, but I'm just saying in general, we need people that are fit for the position. Was that a better? Jesus.
No, I wasn't trying to get that. I wasn't trying to get you to say that. But we could that's the thing though. Maybe it does start with us. Maybe it starts inside.
It does.
It's like, how do you
absolutely does.
You have to but if you're not even willing to look at yourself, then you're just going to perpetuate the cycle, man.
True. That's exactly what's going on. You're right there. Yes. But at the same time, let's even add some butter to that to make it worse. Those people that are doing that are seeking outside and want you to validate me for being dysfunctional. And it's just, you can't get that. You can't. It's not going to happen. It's a negative cycle, and it's going to continue.
Well, right, because we continue the negative cycle.
I hate to use the word broken, but I'm going to say it. We're all broken in some way, okay? We all have scars, I'll say that. We all have scars. So instead of people pointing out your scars and trying to reopen them, it's like, okay, let's sit back and let's see what happens. Or let's get other people involved and get other perspectives and come to, the most positive outcome we can come up with.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. I was just looking at this.
But I think you kind of, I'm going to kind of go off the last point. Well, the last thing that you kind of brought up was in mental health, in medical professionals, mental health professionals, doctors, therapists, psychologists, all those. I think I would love to be able to sit down with one of them and say, in their position, in their job, maybe not their daily functioning, but their job, when they're at work seeing patients, would be more to validate. They should be very strict with these rules of validation,
Yeah, I don't think a lot of them are, though.
Probably not.
I think some of them think that they are.
Again,
now, granted, I'm not saying that they all are, but you can definitely tell, when... But again, it'd be hard for me, but if you're going to validate someone, if you just got out of school and you were taught that this is the method of therapy that you use, it would be invalidating of me to look at that person in a negative light They may not be the right therapist for me, but it would be invalidating of me to look at them negatively because that's just what they think, because that's what they were taught in school.
Right.
But just because you were taught that in school doesn't make that necessarily even right, man.
Right. It doesn't. No.
Because you can be taught all the wrong things.
Right.
And still think that you're, correct.
Right. Right. And I think some of the maybe some of the I don't want to put people in boxes or judge, but I'm just going to say there might be some people that have been in practice for say 30 years, 25 years, and they kind of stopped getting their magazines and doing the updated research on it.
Well, they stopped their continuing education.
So
but again, we don't but we also falter in the human condition that we want to hear something that placates our echo chamber. And we're so afraid of somebody else's thought because it challenges what we think it is.
Yeah, I mean, look I'm not disagreeing with you. I feel like if someone can bring cohesive, respectable idea to the table, then it should be listened to for sure.
Now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with that idea.
No, but that doesn't mean that I should invalidate it though either. Like, I think at some point in again with certain situations, at some point you have to look at the whole and say, I want to be ahead of this. I want to be the CEO of this company and run this facility the way I want to run it because I feel that I can do a good job and I feel that I know what needs to be done. But then you come in and you may be a little bit more qualified or whatever, and these guys, whatever, a vote comes to it and you win it. Like, at some point I have to say, you know what, if he's going to, I have to say, if he's going to do a good job in running it like he's did in the past with other places, look at it as a whole and say, well, the main goal is to have this facility, have the people in this taken care of. You know what I mean? So kind of, I don't know, put your own ego aside for a minute and say, look at the goal and say, this is what we should be focused on. And if this guy's going to do it, then I'm going to support him. Whether or not I like you or not, and I might not like all your ideas. But at the same time,
Yeah, but so if a couple ideas come to fruition that are bad, I still think that you have a responsibility to stand up and say that's a bad fucking idea.
Sure.
Period.
Yeah, but don't if whoever the person who stands up and gets mad and says it's a bad idea, don't get even more mad when they say, "Okay, thanks for your opinion," and continue to do it. That's the I think that's one of the major problems is everyone's got an opinion and says, "Well, I want to be validated on mine." Well, look, okay, well, sometimes, we get it. We all want to be heard, but it's just getting a little out of control here.
Yeah, but there's certain things
you're not in a position, or if you're not in a spot where you have this, a say almost, then unfortunately,
I think in most cases you always have a say. Because by choosing one way or another, you have a say. And if you choose one direction and that's what you're going to support, then you've made a choice. Just like we say that we don't, I'm not making a choice in that because it doesn't concern me. But
so
then
are you saying
it does, you make a choice to say, okay, well, I'm just not going to acknowledge
I think it depends on what it is, though. I think, so you're saying I guess I'm looking at it in the way of mental health. I know that what I would like to see done and what I think would make a positive impact won't get done.
But that doesn't make it wrong for you to stand up for that.
Right. But at the same time, I shouldn't stomp my feet and go, well, screw these guys. No one's listening to me. Or even stop what I'm doing and be like, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore because...
No, I don't...
It's I got to kind of do it just whatever. It's it's almost like, by doing what I'm doing, what we're doing, it's kind of helping in a tiny little teensy weensy way helping to make that possibly happen someday.
Well, it's helping us.
Yeah.
It helps us. It helps us.
But I think by changing yourself and bettering yourself, you're changing the world and bettering the world.
Well, I definitely think you are. It's a matter of how much of that do you put into practice, and how, and again, it's like if you stop doing that, then you stop the process. You constantly have to keep going back to these things to say, is this really working? Is it really working? Is it really working? I guess checking in with yourself and checking in with other, you know what I mean?
Right. I get what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, I think, and that's something that, maybe we get complacent and don't check in, and we just, maybe that's how this pattern started. It's like, oh, this was created, 75 years ago, and my grandfather did it, so it's going to be good, and we can't change it. It's like, well, let's reevaluate now. This is, 100 years later.
I don't think there's enough reevaluation going on.
Well, that's what I mean. I'm saying after 100 years, maybe we should reevaluate. I mean, I think people in interpersonal relationships should do it. Whether or not you're happily married or not, like sit down every couple of years and go, hey, like, are we good? Like, are you on the same wavelength? Are you happy with what's going on now? Why not?
Most people are afraid to, I think.
Probably. Maybe they're afraid of what they're going to hear. I don't know. But at the same time, it's like, what do you, so do we just not do it? Because by not doing it, if you want to do it and say your partner doesn't, you're going to feel invalidated. And eventually, that invalidation is going to turn into resentment.
Right. And it does.
Got cookies? Hi.
What? No appearance? You can make an appearance. Thank you.
Wow, that's a good, look at that service. Will's got the life, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I got it. I'm sorry.
So anyways, I don't know. We may have got off topic a little bit, but
yeah, I don't.
Validation, acknowledgement. Open it up and give it to her. Just do it. You're not invalidating it right now. You're not invalidating this scenario.
No, I am invalidating.
No, you're not.
I'm invalidating this.
You are?
I'm invalidating
well,
this,
now you
this
are.
interaction because I wasn't giving her what she wanted.
Do you see how convoluted this is?
Well, it is because I think that there's so many layers to this taco dip that
it's like
more, it is.
Yeah.
It's like a taco dip.
It's not like a 7-layer taco dip.
No, dude, it's got,
Yeah.
It's and every layer is either good or that layer of guacamole that's on the bottom is not going to be nearly as good as the guacamole on top.
Right.
Because that layer is just buried under a bunch of shit.
And you know what? I may like the bad guacamole and you may not. So it's like, again, it's very hard to
Thank you.
to validate guacamole.
It's never hard to evaluate guacamole.
But
I try to get all
I thought you were cutting down on coffee.
Yeah, so did I.
Oh, okay. Cool.
I'm
just trying to help validate your
I know
your need
but it's like drink, alcohol, coffee. It's like
one or the other.
Well,
That's the way
sometimes
it
is. Sometimes
right.
it is. Not always. Young Dan out there, hopefully you're still not drinking coffee. If you're not drinking coffee,
he's got
that note attached.
He's got it. Yep. He's got his sign taped.
I gotta try his method. Maybe that'll work for me too. Yeah. So. I wherever you stand on validation and acknowledgement.
Yeah, I don't think we really ended up coming out with one or the other.
I don't know if we can.
I just think it's different for everybody. And I think it's different for different scenarios. For different if you want something specific. You know what I mean? Like I think I just feel like it's that taco dip that's that never-ending layers of taco dip.
And maybe is it meant to be that way? Is it meant to be constantly? I mean, can
I don't
you
know.
ever validate something so much that it goes away?
That's a good question.
I don't know if you can.
I don't know. Do you think you can?
All right. Depends on what
Just
you're validating.
Yeah.
See?
See, that's what I mean. It's just.
Well, until then, until next time, we'll.
Well, if
we'll talk
you know
about
what,
validation again.
if anybody's listening and feels eager, feels a little bit like they want to email us and tell us about it, how do they do that, Will?
Hey, get at us at Above Ground Podcast. Go to Facebook, message us, Above Ground Podcast. Everything's Above Ground Podcast. Just go to Above Ground Podcast, find it. Leave us,
Share
leave
it,
us,
star it.
star it, scribe it, and in your scribe, mention that you heard the episode about validation versus acknowledgement.
Apple,
Acknowledgement
Spotify, Libsyn, Google,
yeah, not Libsyn, dude.
iHeartRadio.
iHeart, Audible, Google, everywhere, dude. We're everywhere good podcasts are, and even bad podcasts.
Yeah. See, we're validating both.
See, we're doing it. That's right. And who am I to judge what's a bad podcast?
We acknowledge everybody. So until next time,
Be well.
be safe.
Be
Above.